Ghost of Tsushima was a very fun game and it did a lot of things really well, especially when it came to its world in exploration. But in a lot of other ways, it was also pretty average and, as such, not very memorable, at least for me.
Yes, you'll laugh, you'll cry, it'll change your life.
Which is why when I first started playing Ghost of Yotei, my expectations weren't exactly high. But 48 hours later, the game proved me wrong, and it's now in my top 3 PlayStation first-party titles from this generation after Returnal and Astro Boy. In fact, I'll go one step ahead and label it as what I like to call a perfect sequel. Let's talk about it. One of the standout features that Yotei retains from Tsushima is how cinematic every aspect of the game feels. This is a game that wants you to take in every single pixel on the screen, and it's not afraid of making things a little inconvenient to do it. When you start galloping on the horse, the field of view widens automatically and the aspect ratio changes, as if putting you in the frame of a movie. Every mission has a title reveal at the beginning and the end. Even the camera cuts during the smallest NPC interactions are meticulously handled to highlight the surroundings.
So beautiful.
And it's not just the camera stuff. Even the way the environment reacts to you is just so beautiful. When you ride through a flock of birds, they fly together with you. And when you're relaxing in a hot spring, wildlife shows up to relax next to you. And when you're doing a bamboo strike, cute little foxes can show up to motivate you. Look at how goddamn adorable they are.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
And the backdrop, no matter where you are, is absolutely gorgeous. Vast, colorful fields sprawling as far as the eye can see. Dense forests, snowy mountains, bloody battlefields, and far in the distance, Mount Yotei standing tall, looking over the land of Ezo. And there's a whole lot of footage of that I can show you, but I'm not going to, because Ezo and its scenery is something that you need to experience for yourself. I will say this much though, there are times where this game truly feels like a painting in motion. A very cool thing about Ghost of Yotei is that the game has strong Wild West vibes. Part of it is because your character, Atsu, is an outlaw on a path of vengeance, and the music, the story, the characters all kind of add to that in a very Red Dead Redemption kind of way. In fact, you can see quite a few Red Dead inspirations in a lot of places in Yotei. Drawn out, detailed conversations and interactions, the way you come across random encounters and how they sometimes lead to further events, and most importantly, the characters, no matter how insignificant they might seem at first, have a lot of personality to them. And I think this is a huge testament to the success of Red Dead Redemption 2 that we can now see more teams, and a AAA one at that, who are willing to take their time building out a world and story and let the players lose themselves in it rather than just pushing them to the next objective. For instance, bounty hunting is a major part of Yotei's world. You get most of these from a bounty board, but it's not just a matter of getting to the target and killing them. Every target has their own little story that plays out. Sometimes you'll find yourself competing with other bounty hunters for the prize. Other times, you'll discover that the job isn't exactly cut and dry. And some of the targets end up becoming recurring characters and taking Atsu on, well, really fun adventures. It makes the world of Yotei highly grounded and believable, and the accompanying gameplay just takes it to another level. When I say that Ghost of Yotei is an improvement over Tsushima in almost every way, I mean it. The scope is bigger, it looks better, it plays better, and there is so much more depth and detail to, frankly, everything. For melee weapons, you have 5 choices, and each of these has its own strength, which gives you a reason to switch frequently. For example, your katana is most effective against enemies with katanas, while the kusarigama makes quick work of enemy shields. If you see an enemy with a spear, you better switch to dual katanas, while bigger enemies are best dealt with using the odachi. Switching between weapons is smooth and seamless, and so are the combat animations. Enemy encounters can get really frantic, where the enemies can completely surround you, and you have to be quick on the draw to take them out.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
The ranged arsenal also has good variety, with a short bow and a long bow to take enemies out from a distance silently, and there's a matchlock rifle to shoot up barrels and line up sweet headshots. You also get access to explosives to either blow up your enemies or render them blind. And finally, you have quickfire weapons like the kunai, the smoke grenade, a flint to light your weapon on fire, and dust to throw in your enemy's eyes. Stealth feels much better too. I think that the devs took some major learnings from the bad trailing missions in Tsushima, which is why you don't really see much of it in Yotei, and you also get a ranged assassination option with the kusarigama. Trust me, the amount of variety that Yotei gives you in combat is just phenomenal, and it makes the game very satisfying to play. Side activities also see a huge step up. Not only are there fewer activities to keep the game from getting tedious, they also have little elements for variation that make you want to do more of them. For instance, there's one bamboo strike that requires you to be drunk on sake to complete it. Or you may find someone else who's already trying to strike the bamboo when you get there, and you have to convince them to give you a shot instead. Similarly, at hot springs, you find little notes that tell you the best way to enjoy it. At one location, it tells you to remove the weeds around the spring before you get in. At another, it tells you to light candles around the spring so the wildlife can also join you for a little warmth. With details like this, I wasn't doing these side activities for a trophy or to get a health boost, but to see what else the devs might have added, and that curiosity became my driving force to explore the world of Yotei, creating a world so compelling that you don't need map markers and a list full of objectives to make you go from place to place. You know, like some other games set in Japan.
You know what I'm saying?
Another thing that Yotei does brilliantly is utilizing minigames to add to the broader gameplay and narrative. For example, at specific scenic spots, you do the sumie paintings where you use the DualSense trackpad to paint. Not only is this a side activity in itself, but when you come across a cipher to decode one of your target's code language, the game makes you draw every single character individually. At first, it seems like a stupid and tedious thing to do, but at one point, Atsu says that writing and painting is a good way to memorize stuff, and you know what? It worked like a charm. After the game made me draw those symbols, I remembered each and every one of them till the end and never needed to open the cipher to decode anything. It was such a nice touch, drawing from real-world experience.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And in Tsushima, Jin wrote haikus, whereas in Yotei, Atsu has her shamisen. You see its significance again and again in the story, but the cool thing is, the songs that you learn to play on the shamisen can help guide you to discover more activities and secrets, which again, I think is a great way to encourage exploration that doesn't rely on map markers. God, I really hope you're paying attention to this game, Ubisoft. The game starts with Atsu's family getting slaughtered by a gang known as the Yotei 6, and once she's grown up, she's back to avenge her family and kill every member of the Yotei 6. And that was part of the reason why I was a little apprehensive going into the game, because from the very beginning it's clear that Yotei is a story about revenge, which makes this the third big Sony game that deals with the cycle of vengeance after God of War and The Last of Us 2. So you can understand why I felt that way, especially after that ending in The Last of Us 2.
Vengeance is an idiot's game.
Don't get me wrong, I think The Last of Us 2 is a 10 out of 10 game and Naughty Dog did an amazing job, but that ending was not satisfying at all. To be fair, that was the point of that story, and I really respect the fact that the team had the courage to try and do something that a AAA game usually never would. Don't you worry though.
Don't you worry about a thing, brother.
The way Yotei deals with the cycle of vengeance is completely different than both God of War and The Last of Us 2 and makes for a very compelling narrative. I wasn't a fan of the story in Tsushima because it felt very straightforward and predictable, which is why I love the direction that Yotei takes. I won't be going into any specific details because, you know,
Spoilers.
but the characters feel much more well-rounded as the game actually puts in time and effort to build them up. The story in Yotei is very personal in nature, and the game spares no expense in demonstrating that. Sometimes you see it on screen with the villains themselves, sometimes with flashbacks, other times it's through NPCs in the world and the destruction these villains leave in their wake. And by the time you get to a member of the Yotei 6, you completely understand Atsu's drive for revenge and why she wants to kill that person. The funny thing about this is that the plot of Assassin's Creed Shadows starts very similarly, with Naoe losing her family to a group of killers and then going after them for revenge. But the way these two games handle the story and the world and the characters is so different that in Shadows, going after the Shinbaku feels like a chore, like going through a checklist. While in Yotei, you get to feel like you know these targets personally. A big reason for that is that Ghost of Yotei's writing and performances complement each other really well. There are places where the voice acting feels a little flat, but then come the parts that hit you hard.
Why weren't you there for him?
And the detail in facial animations in those scenes just steals the show.
You were raiding villages.
We needed food!
Do you know how many starved? I must make an example.
Erika Ishii as Atsu has done a great job. Not only does she pull off the lone wolf archetype really well, but there's also some impressive nuance and emotion to her performance.
I'm trying. But I can't do it without you.
There's also plenty of humor in the land of Yotei, regardless of how bleak things may be.
What is that smell?
The mask of a wanted man. He has a rat! Wait! You have a mask of your own!
Sniff me again and I'll cut off your nose.
Ghost of Yotei also creates a stark contrast with Tsushima, and I loved how different these two flavors of Ghost are. Jin Sakai had to pick up the mantle of the Ghost in order to defend his country from invaders, while being a ghost is all that Atsu has ever known. Jin was driven by honor and loyalty, while Atsu is driven by revenge and bloodlust. Ghost of Tsushima starts out with a full-blown war and turns into a personal story where Jin has to go against his uncle, the very man who raised him. While Yotei's story starts out on a very personal note, with Atsu painting the name of her targets on her waistband, and becomes a tale that ties into the fate of the entire region of Ezo. Sucker Punch has done a brilliant job with both these stories, and it only shows that the ghost is not just a person, but a mask. Now, just because I've been gushing about Ghost of Yotei doesn't mean that the game is without issues. There's a little jankiness where sometimes you end up targeting the wrong enemy through no fault of your own, and I saw a few bugs as well, one where I had to quit and restart the game.
Watch your backs! Our army! Oh, I see someone! Get down!
During missions, you really can't go beyond a particular area and the game will teleport you back. Then there are times where it feels like they could have toned down on the cinematic vibe, because every time you obtain a new skin for your katana, there's a close-up shot and a name reveal. It feels cool for the first few times, but trust me, it starts to get annoying when you're seeing it for the 20th time on the screen. Then there's the wolf that shows up and helps you in combat. You can increase your bond with the wolf through a series of small quests. The problem here is that 90% of these missions play out exactly the same way. You get to a wolf den, find some dead bodies, then the wolf leads you to a camp where you kill a bunch of hunters and free the captive wolves. A short cutscene plays out, and then rinse and repeat. Don't get me wrong, the lead up to the slaughter is really fucking cool, but this happens at least 10 times. You see how that could be a little tiresome? And the same thing with duels. When you get in a duel with someone, there's an absolute badass cutscene that plays before it starts. The problem? The exact same cutscene plays out before every single duel. So prepare to watch it a whole bunch of times.
I'm tired, boss.
Now, it's perfectly possible that I'm just being nitpicky and these things stood out to me more because I finished the game in a span of 2 weeks, so I saw these things happening more frequently. If, like a regular person, you only get to play like a couple of hours a day and it takes you longer to get through the game, you might not even notice it. Because the fact is, there's only one actual complaint that I have with Ghost of Yotei, and that is a lack of a 40 FPS balanced mode. I don't get it. The balanced 40 FPS mode is one of the best things we've gotten this generation on console. And this is a first-party PlayStation game developed by a Sony studio, so what's the reasoning here?
Why don't you explain this to me like I am an 8-year-old?
Ghost of Yotei has a 60 FPS performance mode which works flawlessly. It has a 30 FPS quality mode and another 30 FPS ray tracing mode which adds ray tracing to the quality mode but slightly reduces the resolution. It doesn't make sense to me. What's the point of having two 30 FPS modes?
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
I will admit, this is probably the first game in my life that I deliberately chose to play on 30 FPS, partly because all the cutscenes are rendered at 30 FPS and the transition between gameplay and cutscene felt a little jarring when I was playing at 60 FPS, but mostly because the entire vibe of the game is so damn cinematic that honestly, the quality mode with its high resolution felt like the best way to experience it. But the point is, I think it would have been much better to have a 60 FPS performance mode, a 30 FPS ray tracing mode, and a balanced 40 FPS mode because up until now, that has been my favorite way to play on the PS5. I mean, even Assassin's Creed Shadows had it, so what the fuck?
We've got to figure out what's going on.
And I understand that a lot of people wanted to see more of Jin Sakai's story and they're not happy with the new protagonist. But when you're playing through the game and you realize how the devs are treating the concept where a regular human turns into this mythical figure of the ghost simply by virtue of their circumstances and actions, it becomes easy to understand why there's a new protagonist. Jin Sakai might be alive, but his journey as the Ghost of Tsushima was over. Same with Atsu in the Ghost of Yotei. Both of them had different motivations and events that led them to become the Ghost. And now, more than anything, I'm really excited to see where Sucker Punch can take the Ghost next, with a new location, a new time period, and a brand new protagonist with a completely different journey and motivations. Because when it comes down to it, the Ghost is more than just a person. It's an idea.
And ideas are bulletproof.
But let's not digress. This is a game with a lot of care put into it, and that care shows in almost every facet of Yotei. And after all is said and done, the good stuff in Ghost of Yotei outweighs anything bad in it by a huge margin. In fact, it's one of those games where I wish a first-party PlayStation title was releasing on PC at the same time, because it is that good, and I want as many people to play it as possible. It's definitely not a perfect game, but in my opinion, it really is a perfect sequel, and you should play it as soon as you possibly can.